Well, for many, it doesn't get any more glorious than the day Neil Armstrong stepped foot on the moon.
Neil Armstrong's family has just confirmed that the rumors surrounding him are true. For years, whispers followed the famous astronaut, suggesting there was more to his story than the public knew.
We, the crew of Apollo 11, are privileged to represent the United States in our first attempt to take man to another heavenly body.
Now, his family's revelations have brought these speculations into the light, surprising many. Could Armstrong have kept hidden information from the world all this time? We will explore the shocking truths his family has finally revealed that will change everything. The hidden life of Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong is way more than just the first man to step on the moon. His name is permanently recorded in the history books. On July 20th, 1969, as he climbed down the ladder of the Apollo 11 lunar module and said those famous words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind," he instantly became a worldwide icon. His landing marked the climax of the space race, symbolizing not just a win for the United States, but a victory for all of humanity. But Armstrong's story goes beyond his lunar walk, and many details about his life didn't come out until after he passed away.
For someone to be able to do that in their lifetime and experience it where they actually touched down and walked on another surface is overwhelming.
Yet there's a hidden part of Neil Armstrong's life that no one expected. A truth that changes everything we thought we knew about the man who made history, and soon we'll reveal it all. Armstrong was a humble guy who didn't like the spotlight. Instead of soaking up fame, he focused on the nuts and bolts of his job. After his lunar adventure, he went back to a pretty quiet life, teaching at the University of Cincinnati. He used his experiences to teach upcoming engineers and astronauts. Staying out of the limelight only made people respect him more, seeing him as a man of true integrity and quiet strength. But Armstrong's life wasn't without its tough spots and unanswered questions. Even with his public image, parts of his life were kept away from the public eye. Throughout the years, many tales and theories popped up about what he might have seen on the moon and what his life was like afterwards. Did he encounter something on the moon that he kept to himself? Was there more to his calm nature than what was obvious? These questions hung around, but Armstrong never talked about them. It wasn't until after he died in 2012 that some of these questions started to get answers. His first wife, Janet, who had always protected his privacy, began to share details of his life that were previously unknown.
Yeah, the food was terrible, but I enjoyed my time behind the moon. It's a more rugged place and not a very comfortable place.
These revelations seemed to support the suspicions that had been around about Armstrong's time during and after the Apollo 11 mission. Janet revealed things that Armstrong had kept to himself, sometimes quite literally until his death. These insights suggested that his silence, the strange aura, and his reluctance to share too much about what he saw and experienced were not just quirks of his personality, but intentional choices to keep certain things private. So Neil Armstrong's impact is much deeper than just walking on the moon. He was a complex person, a trailblazer whose deeds were as significant as the truths he decided to keep. With these new revelations, we start to understand that his contributions to history and the space program were about more than just his actions. They were also about the things he chose not to share. The Apollo 11 mission was the peak of years of tough training and detailed planning. The road to that unforgettable day in July 1969 was filled with countless hours of hard physical and mental prep. The stakes were sky high, and failure was not an option. They had to be ready for anything and everything, no matter how unlikely. The mission demanded an extraordinary level of endurance and skill. Preparing for the moon's surface was a crucial part of the training. The moon's gravity is only 1/6 of Earth's, which means moving around there would feel weird and difficult. To get used to this, Armstrong spent many hours in a special facility designed to mimic the moon's low-gravity environment. In this place, he practiced walking, running, and moving around in a bulky spacesuit, helped by wires that made it feel like he was on the moon. Along with the physical challenges, Armstrong had to mentally prepare for the isolation and stress of being in space. The Apollo 11 mission would take him hundreds of thousands of miles from Earth, separated from the deadly vacuum of space by just a thin sheet of metal and some tech. NASA's training included intense psychological tests and simulations to make sure the astronauts could stay calm and focused in extreme situations. But behind the quiet man was someone who went through tough training that pushed him to become a true legend. The tough road to the moon. One of the toughest tests was a full-scale practice of the moon landing. Armstrong and his fellow astronaut, Buzz Aldrin, were put in a replica of the lunar module and faced a series of tough scenarios. In one test, the computer that was supposed to guide their landing broke down, and Armstrong had to manually steer the spacecraft. With just moments to spare and the fuel almost gone, he had to find a safe place to land, all while keeping in touch with mission control and staying calm. This test was almost exactly like what he would face later on the moon. Survival training was another key part of getting ready. NASA knew that anything could happen at any time, and the astronauts had to be prepared to handle the worst conditions. Armstrong and his teammates went through intense survival training in deserts, jungles, and the open sea, learning how to make it on their own with very little supplies. In one intense drill, Armstrong was dropped in the middle of a desert with just a small survival kit and had to find his way back to civilization. He also had to become an expert in using the scientific tools and equipment he would need for conducting experiments and collecting samples on the moon. He spent loads of time practicing how to carefully collect and record rock and soil samples, and learning to use cameras and other gadgets in the tough conditions of space. One of the toughest parts of their training was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins, learning to coordinate flawlessly with each other. They spent several months going over every single detail of their space mission together. Their practices included complex tasks like the intricate docking needed to meet up with the lunar module and the exact timing they had to nail for the moon landing. The three developed a strong bond and deep trust, fully knowing that each one's life depended on the other's skills and good judgment. As the launch day got closer, Armstrong's training ramped up. He was well aware that there was no room for mistakes once the mission kicked off.
Neither of us knew what 1202 meant. We knew where we could find the answer, but it was in a document about that thick, and you'd have to leaf through it, and here we are halfway down, landing on the moon.
Every second had to be perfect. When Armstrong and his team got to the launch pad at Cape Kennedy, they were about as ready as anyone could ever be. People who were close to Neil Armstrong have really backed up what many of us have always thought about his legendary preparation, resolve, and abilities. His family, looking back at his legacy, highlighted that Armstrong's remarkable achievements were not just due to his intense training, but also because of who he was as a person. His calm demeanor, his unending quest for perfection, and his ability to stay cool under pressure really set him apart. This made him not just the first man to step on the moon, but also a symbol of what humans can achieve. His family's remarks have confirmed what many suspected, that Neil Armstrong's greatness was as much about his character as it was about his professional accomplishments. On July 20th, 1969, the entire planet was on the edge of their seats as the Apollo 11 lunar module, aptly named Eagle, began its descent toward the moon. This mission, which had started off smoothly with a successful launch, was now at its most crucial phase. The importance of this event was monumental. Billions of people around the world were glued to their television sets, waiting for that one historic moment that would open a new chapter in human history. As they approached the moon's surface, Armstrong and Aldrin ran into a series of technical issues that almost threw a wrench in the works. The computer that was supposed to guide them in their descent got flooded with data and started showing a 1202 error code, a signal that it was overwhelmed. For a few tense minutes, it looked like they might have to scrap the mission. Back at NASA's Mission Control in Houston, engineers were frantically trying to figure out the glitch and provide some kind of guidance to the astronauts. Armstrong, keeping his legendary composure, decided to take control of the lunar module manually. As the world watched the landing, what happened next showed just how skilled and calm Armstrong truly was, seconds from disaster on the moon. The landing was anything but smooth. The spot they had planned to land on turned out to be littered with large boulders and craters, making it too risky to land there. Armstrong had to steer the module away from this dangerous terrain, and look for a safer spot. At the same time, their fuel was quickly running low. With less than 30 seconds of fuel left, Armstrong managed to find a relatively flat area and carefully brought the Eagle down for a landing. The tension dissolved when Armstrong's voice came through the radio, announcing, "Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." The moments that followed are forever stamped in the annals of history. Armstrong made his way down the ladder of the lunar module, and as his left boot touched the moon's dusty surface, he spoke the iconic words, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." It was an unmatched moment of triumph, symbolizing not just the success of the Apollo program, but the creativity and determination of the human spirit. However, as the world watched Armstrong and Aldrin stroll on the moon, collect rock samples, and plant the American flag, there were details of the mission that remained out of the public eye. These undisclosed details would later spark theories and speculation, suggesting that the moon landing was about more than just a scientific and technological victory. A particularly touching but undisclosed detail from the mission, as hinted at in the film based on James R. Hansen's biography of Neil Armstrong, First Man, is that Armstrong might have brought something to the moon in memory of Karen, his late daughter who died from a brain tumor in 1962. Since Armstrong's first wife, Janet, worked closely with the film's directors, it's likely that this gesture was a quiet tribute to their beloved daughter. This act, never recorded or spoken about publicly, remains one of Armstrong's most private moments. It illustrates that amidst one of the most significant achievements in human history, Armstrong was also a father mourning his daughter, finding a way to honor her memory in the most remarkable way imaginable. This deeper understanding of Neil Armstrong, that he was a man of both great accomplishments and profound personal depth, has been reinforced by those who knew him closely. His family's recent insights emphasize that Armstrong's legacy isn't just about his extraordinary professional achievements, but also about the personal struggles he chose to keep private. Unfortunately, the demands of Armstrong's career and his dedication to his mission had a substantial impact on his personal life. Following the death of their daughter Karen, Armstrong threw himself even more into his work. As the space program demanded more and more of his time, he became increasingly removed from his family. Janet found herself essentially raising their two boys, Rick and Mark, on her own, handling the household and parenting duties practically as a single mother. Even though they were often apart and things were tough, Armstrong's family always had good things to say about him. They knew he had big responsibilities, but it was clear their marriage was under a lot of pressure, and by 1994, they had split up. The family has recently shared some insights, making it clear that Armstrong's real achievements weren't just what everyone saw, but also included the tough personal decisions and challenges he faced. Beneath all the historical achievements, there have always been talks and whispers about what Neil Armstrong and his crew might have seen on the moon. Often waved off as just wild guesses, these stories hint that the astronauts might have seen some pretty weird stuff that they kept quiet about. The most talked about rumor is that Armstrong and his team came across unidentified flying objects while they were up there. Some people say that right after they landed on the moon, Armstrong and Aldrin noticed weird lights or shapes near the edge of a crater. These things, described by some as either floating or not moving at all, were totally unexpected. This all supposedly happened during a strange 2-minute gap when there was no live feed from the moon, which makes people even more curious about what really went down during that time. While everyone was focused on the landing, some believe there were other things that still keep people talking today, what Armstrong really saw. The story goes on that Armstrong switched to a private channel that normal folks couldn't listen to. He supposedly sent a hidden message back to NASA, saying, "They're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us." Although it's never been officially confirmed, this message is a big deal in the ongoing talk about whether there's life out there in space and if it's ever come close to us. The idea that Armstrong and Aldrin might have run into something totally out of this world really gets people talking and guessing. To add to the intrigue, the live feed from the moon stopped for exactly 2 minutes during this so-called encounter. Officially, NASA said it was just a tech hiccup. Considering how complex the mission was, that's not too far-fetched. But a lot of folks think this was just a handy excuse to keep the public from seeing or hearing something NASA couldn't easily explain away. This belief that the feed was cut on purpose to hide something keeps these wild guesses alive and kicking. This kind of speculation gets more ammo from incidents reported on other Apollo missions. For example, during the Apollo 8 mission that went around the moon in December 1968, there was a communication blackout for 45 minutes when the spacecraft was on the moon's far side. During this blackout, the astronauts reported seeing lights that looked like campfires on the moon. NASA later said these might just be reflections from bits of the spacecraft floating around, but the timing, right during a communications blackout, makes people wonder if there's more to the story. In terms of Apollo 11, the talk about aliens goes beyond just spotting UFOs. Some folks think Armstrong and Aldrin found actual physical proof of aliens or some advanced tech on the moon. These theories suggest that the astronauts came across old buildings or stuff left behind by a super smart group that might have lived on the moon or used it as a sort of space base. Those who believe this point out how carefully the astronauts collected rocks and documented everything on the moon's surface, maybe looking for and even finding something truly incredible. One of the bolder claims is that Armstrong and Aldrin saw a huge alien ship near the edge of a crater. According to some, this ship was massive and like nothing they'd ever seen before. The idea that the moon could be a spot for storing alien tech or a meeting point for beings from other planets has been a staple in sci-fi, but some think it could actually be based on truth. They say the way the astronauts acted differently after coming back, like Armstrong wanting more privacy, might be because they saw something so mind-blowing that it changed how they saw the world and their place in it. Another exciting guess is that the moon itself might have alien life or be a place where aliens are still hanging out. Some folks point to strange stuff other Apollo missions reported, like lights moving around on the moon or weird noises the astronauts heard. These odd reports, though not widely known, help support the idea that the moon isn't just a dead rock floating in space, but that Armstrong and his team might have been the first people to run into signs of aliens there. While none of this has ever been proven, it keeps fueling the fire for conversations and debates among folks who are into UFOs, researchers, and just regular people too. In the past few years, the government letting out previously confidential documents about UFO sightings and other weird happenings has thrown even more fuel on the fire. Some of these papers hint that the US government has been in the know and checking out these odd events for a long time. Armstrong's choice to stay quiet about some parts of his mission, plus what his family has shared recently, only makes people even more curious. When Neil Armstrong passed away on August 25, 2012, it was a big loss for everyone. The man who first walked on the moon left behind a legacy of bravery, new ideas, and staying humble. Even after he died, he still kept people hooked. His wife, Carol, found something that gave everyone a new glimpse into who he really was after he was gone. Tucked away in a closet was a simple white cloth bag. It looked pretty plain at first, but inside it were items that told a deeper story about the private side of Armstrong that most people never saw. Could Neil Armstrong have hidden something far bigger than we ever imagined? Or is this just another story blown out of proportion? Tell us what you think and remember to like and subscribe for more.